So my partner's name's Andrea Harvey. She's one of the authors with Sev Tasker of the BSAVA manual on cat medicine. And for some reason, we got together some years ago. It was a complete mystery to me because I'd reached the stage in life where I'd given up trying to find anybody that would put up with me. And for some reason, she liked me. And so she came to Australia. And I had 2 cats in the farm, and she had a horse and 2 cats. And so she brought them to Australia. Now that's commitment to somebody you love if you'll fly their horse to Australia. Okay, that's like flying first class a whole around the world twice. So she had 2 cats. Unfortunately, Jack died of pancreatic carcinoma just before he was going to go. But this is Thomas, who's the Bristol SPF blood donor research cat that she took home after about 5 years. So this is Thomas, and this is the British have this expression, taking the piss. That's what he's doing at the moment? No, okay. So Thomas came to Australia, and in order to come to Australia, you need to go in quarantine for a couple of weeks in the UK, get rabies vaccination, make sure you're healthy, come to Australia, you're in quarantine for another 6 weeks, and then you pick up the cat. So Thomas was in quarantine. You've got no ability you can't tell them what to feed them. They've got their own veterinary advice. So they fed the cat on commercial food, a mixture of dry food and canned food. And when Andrea picked up the cat, this is what Thomas looked like. Now, you see, I was brought up with the Jewish persuasion, but I actually sort of really gravitate towards the Jedi religion. And in my religion, you see, you would immediately think Jabba the Hutt. Bring me Solo and the Wookiee. They will pay for this out. No, it's all right. Okay. Now, it just so happened, luckily, Andrea and Sam Taylor, who I believe is a person that uses Pete Jaffa's practice for her own cats, wrote this book, Caring for an Overweight Cat. And so it wasn't very difficult for Andrea to implement a diet. Whoops. It's disappeared completely. Anyway, the cat lost weight, and all we did was get rid of dry food and fed it 70 grams of wet food twice a day. And Linda Fleeman, that runs a diabetes clinic, tells me that she can get almost any fat diabetic cat to lose weight by feeding it 85 grams of any commercial canned food twice a day, or 85 grams of any meat twice a day. You know, that's the new way to treat diabetes, if you will, is a high protein diet. But you don't need to buy the MD made by Hills. You can just use beef or chicken or Fancy Feast. I don't like when my slides disappear because I take a long time to put them through. So, you know, at some level I don't need to do this because all of you I'm preaching to the converted. You all know what I know about. But all of the speakers at the conference, all of the human speakers, provided compelling evidence that feeding an extruded, highly refined, carbohydrate-rich diet is bad for pets. It's bad for people, and we are omnivores. If you look at our dentition, we've got grinding teeth, and we don't have especially big canine teeth. You know, us and the pigs, we're cosmopolitan in our tastes. We can do things. The cat is an obligate carnivore, and the dog's pretty close. And so if this is bad for us, if all of the people in the Charles Perkins Centre say that, and they all talk about the marketing of Big Soda and Big Pharma and all of those things, it's all just telling us that we're on the thing. So I wanted to sort of start with some facts, and remember this is the talk I gave at the time. People spend about 5 times as much money on pet food as they do on veterinary care. That's really an important driver, you know, for the duration of a cat's life. Now, I don't know, it's different in the UK because you've got pet insurance and people have a different level of commitment to animals. But the driver, people spend much more money on food than they do on veterinary care. So if you add up how much money they spend every year, that's a big economic driver for pet owners. And pet food manufacturers have an obligation to look after their shareholders. There's nothing in their charter that says they should be interested in animal welfare. You like my animated GIF files? I searched the internet for hours to find them. You can have them all for all of your talks. He's really got the shits. But if you buy shares in Colgate Palmolive, they own Hills, and you want to get a dividend every year. That's the driver. Who makes pet food? Now, this has changed since I did that, and Pete's more up to date than me, but traditionally it used to be Nestle, that gobbled up Purina. Purina was the first company that developed kibble, because there was a biscuit company in America and they couldn't sell all the biscuits, so they started selling it as dog food. And then they reverse engineered it. They worked out a way to make biscuit into a better diet by adding fat and protein and to make it better. But that's how it all started. So Nestle got a Swiss company that is generally regarded as being a very bad company about what it does to developing third world nations and how it sells things. It's not like, I eat a lot of Nestle chocolate, okay, but they're not really a highly ethical company in terms of what they do in terms of philanthropic activities. Mars, that used to own Walthams, it's sort of almost disappeared. They bought Royal Canin because I think they thought the food was a bit better. In Australia they own Uncle Ben's, which is an Australian subsidiary that makes most of the supermarket brands using Australian produce and wheat and beef and things like that. And then we've got Colgate-Palmolive that own Hills. Now, isn't it interesting? Here we've got pet food companies. We've got one chocolate maker, another chocolate maker, and people that make toothpaste. Like, the skill that they bring is marketing, okay? And, you know, all of these foods, chocolate's really nice, but you don't need it. And that's like this. So the marketing is outstanding, and they've worked out the way to get vets and pet stores and even universities to do their marketing for them. And so Darth makes an important contribution here because they really have, you know, got us to go to the dark side. Now, I work at this practice. This is Double Bay Vet Clinic, and luckily it's not in Australia, so none of you are likely to go there. And it's a very typical clinic in a very posh part of Sydney. It's like a 3-vet practice with an emphasis on medicine rather than on surgery. And this is the waiting room. This is one side. And I would suggest to you that 90% of veterinary practices in Australia are just like that. It isn't like, where's the thing about saying how to prevent tick paralysis? Or how often your cat should be vaccinated? I mean, when you go to the doctor, do you go there and find there's a shelf of chocolate for you to eat in the waiting room while you wait to see the GP? It doesn't happen in Australia, I don't know here. Here's the other side of the room, okay, where the pet treats and things are. Now I was going to try, do you have greenies here? Yeah. Do you know when greenies came out, like it was supposed to be a dental chew that abrased the tartar off dogs' teeth? The first design model inadvertently was a perfectly designed esophageal foreign body because many dogs didn't chew it because they thought, oh, you know, if you give a dog a chicken wing, which is sort of one of my favourite things to give dogs, they go crunch, crunch, swallow. So they can eat a chicken wing like a medium-sized dog in one go. So this was designed for dogs to chew, but they'd gulp it down. And these serrations caused a lot of friction, and it would swell as soon as it hit the esophagus. So it was like somebody purposely designed the most effective esophageal foreign body ever invented. And Michael Ebe got a really high impact paper in JAVMA talking about how to remove them with an endoscope, and then they changed the size of it to stop that thing happening. That's what happens when you try to invent something that is like a gentle bone and ask people to pay 5 times as much of buying the right one from the butcher. Now, 2 more things. Can you see down here it says Vet's Best Rewards, and it's got a picture of a professor from the University of Sydney, and now I've deliberately half hidden his face. And I won't mention his name because you're recording this, and I'm already in a shitload of trouble with everybody in the University of Sydney about almost everything. I've been excommunicated once, and I'm sure the second coming is about to happen. But why do we have the face of a professor from the University of Sydney on a dog treat thing? Does he get paid for it? Does the university get paid for it? How much credibility can anybody have when their photo is on that? I mean, I find it truly extraordinary. Now the other thing is, do you have these liver treats? Okay, it's lyophilized liver, it's freeze-dried liver in slices. And if you weigh it and put it on an analytic scale, it's more expensive than caviar. Okay? Well, close. So, Martin, just my motto, never let facts interfere with a good story, was the motto my mother told me when I was young. It is like you pay $8, If you went to the butcher, they would give you some liver. You could slice it up and it would be fresh. And every vet in Sydney has this, and at the end of a consult, they give the dog a liver treat and make a shitload of money for this particular company. So I was going to do a little experiment, okay? This is bottled water, correct? How much do you think this cost? £5. How much?
Maybe £5.
Okay. It's more expensive than petrol. Now, for Martin, who really embraces evidence-based medicine, it's been shown in Australia that in a taste test where they've got all of these bottled waters and they've compared them to what we call Sydney water, which is what comes out of the tap. And if you all put them in the fridge and pour them into a glass jar, Sydney water wins the taste test. And how much does it cost? Nothing. Now, why have you people that embrace natural feeding bought 30 bottles for £5 each of this stuff? Isn't it extraordinary the power of marketing? When I was a kid growing up, you know, I was a bit like that. Long hair. Anyway, back to Forrest Gump. We had a bubbler. You press the button, put your mouth, you drink. They were everywhere. If you didn't think that if your person before looked a bit dirty, you'd use your elbow and clean it a little bit first before you'd have a suck on it. But like, why? It's just the same. Liver treats, bottled water. It's a type of insanity. It's more expensive than petrol. Do all of you complain when you go to the car and you put petrol in? Oh shit, it's expensive. 20 quid for 1 litre. Now, these are assorted things. This is really, I think, the crux of the matter, and I think all of you know it. But I think it's really important we stand on a pedestal and we tell the whole world. This means almost every university on the planet is in bed with multinational pet food manufacturers. Okay, now you can't read all of those things. I've got some from the UK. Let me talk about some things in Australia. The University of Queensland School of Veterinary Science has stepped up its focus on animal nutrition through a strong partnership with premium pet food maker Hills. Doesn't it sound like it's the pastor giving a sermon on Sunday? It's really like bang it a little bit harder, drive it in. You know, premium food, it's never happened before, 2 academic positions at the University of Queensland. Is it surprising that when they've polled people that come out of the unis in Australia that 90% of the people recommend a prescription diet with every consult? So you think, oh, it's just the Queenslanders, like they're a bit funny. Could that be it? But look, University of Melbourne, and they always have a picture of the smiling dean. Okay, and so here's Carolyn Mansfield. She's really good. She's a really good clinician. She trained with Boyd Jones way back. But her salary gets paid for by Hills, and she's the head of medicine at the University of Melbourne, and I think that's really good. There has to be a separation of powers. We have it in our society. Politician and law are different. You can't get money from these people and have the head of medicine that is specifically interested in gastroenterology and pancreatitis being paid money from a pet food manufacturer. You just can't do it. Like, every time she gives a lecture, she needs to give a disclosure. I need to tell all of you guys that my salary gets paid for by Hills. It doesn't happen. It's not right. And it happens everywhere. It happens at Davis. Look at this. This came out as an email. They had there's a lot of focus in Australia about mental health in veterinarians. A lot of suicide, a lot of depression, a lot of issues. So they have these things for students. And who's bringing it to you? Hills. Everywhere. I don't know. The biggest trouble is the evidence base in relation to feeding companion animals is incredibly biased. And that's because it's really expensive to do nutrition research, especially the type that goes for the arc of a life of an animal. What's been very well studied is how to grow a kitten into a cat. We know exactly how much vitamin D they need. We know the calcium to phosphorus ratio that they need. We can grow things really well, just like we can grow poultry really well or pigs really well. We actually don't know the requirements for an adult cat. Nobody has worked out how much vitamin D an adult cat needs. All of the cat foods have got too much vitamin D. Probably it doesn't do any harm, but maybe it does, because they've only done the research in kittens. If you want to study the lifetime impact of feeding a particular diet, and it's been done, it costs about $1 million. So there's a really good study by Richard Kearney, known by his friends as Dick Kearney, who used to work for Purina. and he did a lifetime study in golden retrievers. He had 2 runs, one on the left, one on the right, and he did a very simple thing. They were all fed Purina food. Can't remember what it was. One group was fed to be lean, and they used portion control, and the other group was fed to be fat, and they looked how long they lived. And the thin group lived 2 years longer than the fat group, and the fat group was euthanized for osteoarthritis or cancer. That was a $1 million experiment because the dogs all needed to be walked. They all needed to be fed. They all needed veterinary attention. They were specifically, the real focus on the study was the impact of diet on hip dysplasia and adiposity. But the interesting thing for me was how long the dogs lived. Like we know in most species, if you keep things lean, they live longer. And the reasons why are complex. And the one thing I can tell you is everything is far more complicated than we can ever understand. Nutrition, genomics, how it all mixes up together. We simplify everything so in our working brain we can make decisions about sick animals, but everything is really complicated. Well, diet doesn't make sense for a carnivore. Like, can't be. Like, we should be feeding, like, when a cat is eating a rat or a mouse or a rabbit, the only carbohydrate it gets is the glycogen in the liver. Like, the rest of it's water, protein, fat. Collagen's protein, keratin's protein. Like, carbohydrate, a little bit of the GI contents. So to base the diet around some cereal, it doesn't make sense. It's teleology. It's not the same as proof, but it certainly doesn't make sense to me. I don't think dry food makes any sense to animals. Cats are very good at not drinking water. If you feed a cat a natural diet, it doesn't drink, except if they eat something that requires a lot of mastication and they salivate a lot, you'll often see them have about 5 mils of water at the end to catch up what they've used as saliva. But if you feed them commercial canned food, you never give them dry food, cats almost never drink anything. That's been shown by numerous research groups all around the world. Feed them dry food, they drink a shitload because, you know, they're used to eating something that's 70% water. And this is all like bullshit. This is what I feel. You know, highly refined extruded diets tend to be deficient in micronutrients. People make up for it by over-supplementing with antioxidants and vitamins and other things, so they frequently get the ratios wrong. It's hard to get it really right. And it wouldn't matter, or it would matter less, if they fed this food today and this food tomorrow and a little bit of this and something different. But if in America they're trained, all at the uni, every vet feeds their cat Hill Science diet forever. Like, they must be a genius to get it perfectly right so the cat never has a chance to eat anything else. What if they just miscalculated something? They did once with one of their kidney diets, and that's how we discovered taurine deficiency causes cardiomyopathy. It was always known cats had reductive evolution and obligate requirement for taurine because of their different bile acid metabolism, but it wasn't until Paul Pion and the owner of the cat stumbled on the fact that this diet made for chronic kidney disease was not sufficiently supplemented with taurine that they worked out that they needed to give more and pay more attention to it. Before then they were interested in taurine in the eye and the retina. Then they discovered it was also important in the heart. But if you just feed one type of food, it's a big obligation to get it completely correct. So the diets that you give where you have this today and the bits tomorrow and a little bit of mixing it up with multiple ingredients, that works much better for me, especially if they change from season to season. David Rammerheimer's work in a whole variety of species is looking at things like a low-level gorilla that part of the year eats berries for 3 months because they're abundant and they get fat and do well, and then for another 3 months they eat bamboo shoots and how their metabolism shifts and changes during those transitions. So that One Health comparative meta thing is really interesting. This is not well appreciated. Diets eaten easily don't satisfy a carnivore. There's a real desire for cats and dogs to want to pretend they're killing their prey and be possessive about food and want to eat it. It's part of their DNA. It's such a natural thing. So that's like really important from a welfare point of view. And they don't settle nearly as well until they go through that process of chewing and mastication and stripping the periosteum off. And all of that, of course, has a cleansing action on the teeth, as Tom Lonsdale pointed out long, long ago. The other thing is it's false. People think that the premium dry foods are very cost effective. They're not. not compared to feeding a whole lot of things you can get. So I've talked about all of those things I think about. You do need to be very good about choosing the right bones to go with the food, because if you choose the wrong bone, you're really good at getting slab fractures of the carnassial teeth. In cats, it's pretty easy because all the chickens in Australia are killed when they're 7 to 8 weeks of age, and their bones are really soft, and the cats can gnaw them almost completely and digest them really well. But with dogs, choosing the right bone is really important. So you see, the chimpanzee, he's all-knowing and very knowledgeable. And this I found from a Purina symposium. Just forget the last bit, is known that cats eating a high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet seldom, if ever, become obese. These are the people, these are like the fathers of nutrition, and they'll admit this. But they're not pushing the canned food lines they have, they're pushing the dry food lines. So we need to look for insights elsewhere. And for me, I tend to look for zoo vets, and I think we have some here. People like Martin, my colleague there, that was talking about the microbiome and the anogenital region of cats and how a lot of common sense there. And it's interesting because in zoos, the hills haven't yet made the lion diet. They're actually working on it, and I'm not joking. There's a move in America in
they've got competition. Missouri's makes all the processed food for the American zoos.
But there's a move towards feeding big cats processed food in America. Whereas in Australia, there's like it's almost like they want to kill an antelope every so often because they breed really quickly and feed that to the lions. But they don't, because they think that's politically incorrect. But the zoos tend to employ nutritionalists to work with vets to formulate diets. But the type of thing they're doing is very similar to what Lynn talks about. And they're trying to get the right balance between micro and macronutrients, and they tend to feed big chunks of things that are alive. And they tend to often feed either whole animals or quarter of animals. And so they really think this stripping of the bone and fleshing and pulling the feathers out and eating some of that is really important and all, part of the deal. So I just have some nice photos of different big cats having big feeds. And we have open plain zoos where they've got big farms they've turned into zoos, and you drive around with moats that protect you from the animals. They can take these nice photographs of them eating things like that. He's eating a chicken. And look, he's so happy. The conceptual framework for what Lynn believes is cats are hypercarnivores, dogs are mesocarnivores. So there's a different level of carnivore. They've evolved to eat the flesh, bones and viscera of animals. High gastric acidity is very important for killing bacteria. But just remember, everything in the stomach is very non-homogeneous. The pH that is present in the mucus layer around the stomach is quite different to what's in the lumen, because the Helicobacter makes a shitload of urease, and the urease makes ammonia, which buffers it so those bacteria can survive and keep there. So things are always more complicated, and I still say this, but just think everything is really complicated. But they're certainly used through evolution to be eating anything, so they've evolved to do all of that. Just as dogs and cats have a behavioural requirement for hunting, they have a similar need for tearing flesh apart and chewing, particularly cats. It's hard to get that for dogs the way we can get things. Hypercarnivores have a requirement for special nutrients that comes from reductive evolution. Have you heard this word, reductive evolution? Yes? No? It's funny because for me it pops up in many different places. Can I just go off on a complete tangent just to keep you awake? You all know about tuberculosis, most important disease on the planet. You know, it is. More people die of it. It has more impact than any other disease. Number 2 is malaria, number 3 is HIV. So TB is the most important infectious disease on the planet Earth. And it's a mycobacteria. It went from Mycobacterium bovis to Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And the genome is about, I won't tell you how many base pairs, but about this big, right? But you know about leprosy, which is the other mycobacterial disease of antiquity? Its genome is this big, because you can't grow leprosy. It only grows in people, animals, and 7-banded armadillos. Not 9-banded armadillos, only 7-banded armadillos. And it's lost the ability to live in any environmental niche. You can't grow it on a Petri dish. And now, because of the power of bioinformatics, they can look at individual genes that code for iron metabolism or sequestration or oxidative burst or all of the different things. And they say, that's a pseudogene. In TB, that gene is this long, and in leprosy, it's got a stop codon, because it's so adapted to having life in a mammalian host. It spreads from mu to you. It doesn't have to live in the ground like Ernie's disease has to. So it doesn't need all those genes. And it's exactly the same as a cat. If you are always going to get your food from killing an animal and eating its flesh, you don't need the enzymic machinery to deal with xenobiotics that herbivorous animals eat. So if you're an omnivore like us, or a cow, or a koala, you need to be able to eat a whole variety of plant alkaloids and different things in the environment and metabolise them to make them safe. And so the cat's lost that, which is why it has such difficulty with glucuronization, because glucuronization is a very good way to solubilise funny plant compounds. And all of these things are probably why dogs get renal disease with grape toxicity and cats get renal disease from lilies, because a sensible animal, if you fed lilies to a dog or a rabbit, nothing happens. So whatever the toxic principle is, they do something with it to inactivate it. But the cat, because it is focused on eating only the prey and whatever is in the guts, it's lost that ability. And so carnivores, both the dog and the cat, they don't make vitamin D in their skin. Now none of you get any vitamin D because there's no sun in the UK. So like you're completely dependent on the diet. But in Australia we have plenty of sun, but the dogs and cats, they don't have the enzyme in their skin to do it. So it's just really important to think about studying reductive evolution to understand why cats are so different. And dogs are well on that pathway, although you can feed them more things. And I'll skip over that.